Hi, everyone, and welcome to the CCAG Climate Conversation. I am your host, Mitzi Jonelle Tan, and I'm a climate justice activist from the Philippines. Today, we're talking about one of the most urgent dimensions of the climate crisis, planetary tipping points. These are the thresholds where gradual environmental change gives way to sudden, dramatic shifts, where ecosystems can collapse and feedback loops can accelerate global warming beyond our control. Reaching a tipping point means crossing a line that cannot easily be undone, and we're already seeing warning signs. Just this month, scientists reported the coral reefs are experiencing mass die-offs, marking what many see as the first major tipping point of the climate era. It's a reminder that these changes aren't abstract, they're happening now. Few places illustrate this risk more clearly than the Amazon rainforest. As we approach COP30 hosted in Brazil, the Amazon is dangerously close to reaching a tipping point, one that could transform vast rainforests into a savanna and reshape weather systems across the planet. And today we'll explore what this means for our future and what can still be done to bring us back from the brink. I'm joined today by two incredible guests, Professor Carlos Nobre, a leading climate scientist and longtime advocate for Amazon protection, and Professor Mark Maslin, CCAG member and climate scientist at University College London. Thank you both so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here, Mitzi.
Thank you very much, Mitzi.
So, Mark, let's start at the beginning. For people who might not have heard of the term before, what exactly is a climate tipping point, and why do these thresholds matter so much?
So, climate tipping points are thresholds in the climate system, which, if we pass them, could lead to irreversible and possibly catastrophic change. And scientists are really worried about these and have identified them. So there's 9 global tipping points and about 7 regional tipping points that we're worried about. If we step out and look at the 9 global tipping points, these include the collapse of the Greenland ice sheet, the Western Antarctic ice sheet, the Eastern Antarctic ice sheet, but it's also then the collapse of deep ocean circulation in the Labrador Sea and in the North Atlantic. And also we're worried about the sea ice collapse in the Arctic. And as the permafrost melts in the high latitudes, all that methane being released. And lastly, but let's not forget it, what we're discussing today, which is the possibility of the Amazon rainforest dieback.
Yes, I mean, Mark has already mentioned what are the tipping points. We are very close to exceed many of those tipping points, particularly, as you said, Mitzi, coral reefs. Starting to see the bleaching of coral reefs for several years, but now species are being extincted, and a tremendous risk if the tropical ocean temperature exceeds 1.5 degrees. The science shows most coral reefs will be extincted. And if it reaches 2 degrees, all coral reefs will be extincted. And coral reefs maintain 18 to 25% of ocean biodiversity. So it's tremendous risk. We are going to start the 6 species extinctions, even if we reach 2 degrees global warming, and we are not very far from reaching 2 degrees if we continue with emissions of greenhouse gases.
Thank you, Mark and Carlos. I think what you've said now really highlights the importance of understanding what's happening, that climate change isn't just random emissions in the air and controlling how much emissions we have, but really understanding how all these biodiversity arenas, how all these critical points intersect with each other and how they can accelerate each other or maybe even have positive tipping points. But before we get to the positive side, Carlos, I wanted to ask you, how close are we to crossing some of the critical points like the Amazon dieback, Arctic thaw, or ice sheet collapse?
Yes, the Amazon is very, very close to a tipping point. And this is the synergistic combination of land use change. We have already 18%, 18% of the Amazon deforest, 30% degraded, and global warming. Global warming has induced severe droughts, 2005, 2010, 2015, 16, 2023, 24, record-breaking, this one, the last one. So the synergistic combination of these droughts with deforestation has put in the southern Amazon, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Bolivian Amazon, 2.5 million square kilometers, very, very close to a tipping point. Dry season is 4 to 5 weeks lengthier. Dry season is 20-30% drier, 2 degrees warmer, and it's southeastern Amazon. The forest is becoming a carbon source. So if we continue exceeding 20 to 25% deforestation and global warming reach 2 degrees warming, no way, 30 to 50 years, we are going to lose 70% of the forest, self-degradation. We're going to lose the largest biodiversity on the planet and release more than 250 billion tons of carbon dioxide and stop recycling water, which feeds rainfall south of the Amazon a lot. Up to 50% of rainfall comes from these so-called aerial rivers. So that's why we have really to stop deforestation immediately. Degradation and fires, large-scale forest restoration, creating a new social bioeconomy of standing forests and flowing rivers, and valuing indigenous knowledge, local communities. Indigenous people are living in the Amazon for 14,000 years, always maintain the forest and develop the indigenous science, use thousands of products of the biodiversity.
Thank you, Carlos. And you're completely right. I think a lot of the struggles that we're seeing today and the climate crisis started with this imbalance of forgetting indigenous and traditional knowledge and not valuing it and understanding this relationship with the earth. And so I want to ask both of you now, maybe Mark, you can start. What would it mean for global temperature, rainfall, and for communities everywhere if one or the other tipping points were crossed?
So again, I think we are looking at the different tipping points have different impacts. And I think one of the concerns that we all have as scientists is the possibility of cascading failure. And that's something that people don't usually talk about. They only talk about the individual tipping points. But if you imagine, say, the sea ice in the Arctic retreats and is permanently removed, suddenly that ocean is much darker than the ice. So it heats up. So that warms the area. That would accelerate the melting of the Greenland ice sheet. That rises sea level. That will undercut the Antarctic ice sheet and will accelerate the loss of that ice sheet. And between the Western Antarctic ice sheet and the Greenland ice sheet, there's 13 meters of sea level rise there. So that may not happen until the next century, but we may have already passed those tipping points, and these things are irreversible. So again, it's about looking at how critical are these tipping points, how close are we, and then trying to remind politicians that they're playing with the fate of the planet because they want to keep burning fossil fuels. And I think that's the critical message we need to get to COP30 and all the other meetings that are going to go on in the next couple of months.
Carlos, do you want to add something?
Well, of course, I mean, it's very important what Mark said. And if we really cross some of these tipping points, of course, the Greenland ice sheet, Western Antarctic ice sheets would raise a lot the sea level. But as I mentioned before, permafrost and the Amazon. So we may reach 3-4 degrees by 2100. This is really, if we reach that, equatorial areas on sea level become inhabitable. The temperature and humidity would be those limits the human body does not survive. Babies, elderly people, half an hour, 1 hour, adults, 2-3 hours. And even mid-latitudes will have 90, 100 days inhabitable. And if that happens, also another tremendous risk tipping point. If the oceans warm up too much, particularly Arctic Ocean, we will release tremendous amount of methane, which is deep into this ocean, particularly the Arctic. And if we do that, the global warming will reach 8 to 10 degrees by 2150. And that's really inhabitable, most of the planet except the top of the Alps and this Himalaya and North and South Pole. So, and then, of course, it's not only coral reefs. We are going to start species extinctions, millions of species. So 6 species extinction. The first one called species, we humans. So I see we really have a tremendous challenge, and so the COP30 for sure. I say has to be very, very important. I would say as important as Paris Agreement and COP26, when all countries agree on advancing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Now, COP30, because we are very close to reach 1.5 degrees, science shows 5 to 10 years, we're going to get permanently 1.5 degrees. And COP30 countries, all countries, unfortunately, US is not in there, but all other countries have to really agree on accelerating the reduction of emissions. We are releasing a study we're going also to present at COP30. We demonstrate Brazil can get to net zero emissions by 2040. No longer than 2040. Totally feasible for Brazil to do it. In Brazil, 70% of emissions come from land use change, 40% deforestation, 30% agriculture. So Brazil can really move zero deforestation, all biomes, regenerative agriculture, but of course, 24% of Brazil's emission. Fossil fuels, but Brazil can really get to zero fossil fuels by 2040. I hope many other countries will also see the urgency of reducing emissions.
Thank you, Carlos and Mark. I really want to emphasize that to our viewers, that the tipping points are connected and they could trigger each other, and that it could cause a domino effect. And that's what Mark was really emphasizing in the beginning. And now what Carlos is really saying of how we really need to address these issues and really understand that this is about life on the planet, right? Like, I really appreciate what Carlos was talking about, like how the biodiversity, we need it to survive. And that's why if it gets worse, it's children, it's elderly, it's marginalized peoples, often the indigenous peoples, often the folks that have contributed very little to the climate crisis will be the ones that are most directly affected and will be experiencing the long-term impacts. And so this COP30, this UN climate conference that's coming up really soon, is incredibly important. And Carlos, you already talked about some of the long-term goals like net zero by 2040, by 2050, but we also need to avoid tipping points, and that depends on rapid near-term cooling. Mark, can you explain why this next decade is so crucial?
So I think Carlos has already mentioned it. The key thing is that 1.5 target. So this was set up in Paris, where the leaders of the world 10 years ago said, we will keep global warming to significantly below 2 degrees, and we will aim for 1.5. Now, the interesting thing is that at COP26 in Glasgow and at the next 3 COP meetings, that top line 1.5 is the first thing that's agreed by every single country in the world, is that that's the one thing we're aiming for. The problem is, as many of your viewers will know, in 2024, we actually had a year that was warmer than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. It was the warmest year on record. It was smashed the record. And so as scientists, just because we've gone through it doesn't mean we have permanently gone past that, as Carlos was saying. But I would say within the next 5 years, perhaps 10 years, we will have gone through that, and we will be looking at 1.5 in the rear mirror and going, wasn't that nice? So what we have to do is consider 2 things. One, as we've been trying to drive, we need to get to net zero global emissions as soon as possible. Now, most of the world has pledges for this. So UK and Europe, it's 2050. It was 2050 for the US, but they've withdrawn. You've got 2060 for for China, and 2070 for India. So everybody's thinking about how to get to net zero. So we have to accelerate that. But because we've taken too much time, we also have to think about the overshoot. How do we bring the climate back down to 1.5? And that's going to take not only to get to net zero as quick as possible, but we're going to have to start thinking about how do we actually pull the greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere to get the temperature back down to something that is safe for everyone on the planet. And that's the challenge.
And I just want to compliment, I'm very much for nature-based solutions. Therefore, removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, myself and most scientists, we fully defend large-scale forest restoration all over the planet. Ideally, we would like to restore 10 million square kilometers all over the planet, 1 million square kilometers in the Amazon. But if we do that, then we would remove more than something like 8 to 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide per month. And we have to do that up to 2100. So that would really be the way, reducing emissions and then removing carbon dioxide. If we do that, we certainly will exceed a little bit 1.5, but certainly by 2100, we would be even before 1.5 degrees. It's funny because I was at IPCC first assessment report, 1990, and we are talking, wow, the temperature is reaching 0.5 degrees warming, and we should not really accept exceeding one degree warming. And we said, we have to get to net zero emissions by 2000. All of us scientists were saying that. Nothing of that happened. 2024, record-breaking emissions. So really, we have to be very careful about that.
Mitzi, I also want to really emphasize to your viewers, this is not a fantasy that Carlos and I and other scientists have. If we look in the 1990s, China, they reforested 100 million hectares in Western China because of desertification. And they went for it. They started to plant trees. They supported farmers. They funded them. So we know that if we put our minds to it, we can support nature, we can reforest, we can rewild vast areas, which has such a positive effect. I mean, Mitzi, I've gone on about this time and time again, but so when they did this, not only did the trees stabilize the soil, not only did they stop the flash floods, not only did they increase agricultural production, but they also stabilized the local rainfall, because trees, of course, as Carlos has said, puts huge amounts of moisture into the atmosphere. So you dampen the atmosphere, you make the rains more consistent. That's what nature does to control the local climate. So again, this isn't fantasy. We can do it. We just need the political will that only occurs occasionally. So that's something we have to push for.
And the one more good thing that Mark mentioned, China. In September, I spent 8 days in China, Shanghai and Beijing. I was so excited to see urban forest restoration. All cities in China have beautiful forests all over, along the roads, along the avenues. That really reduced maximum temperature. Really, it's called urban sponge, does not allow inundations, floods, and removes pollutants as well. So really, absolutely, China is a good example. But of course, as Mark said, during COP26, China said they will only get to net zero emissions by 2060. We have to really to count that China will reduce emissions much earlier than 2060.
Thank you both so much for that emphasis. And it's true, nature-based solutions are already here, right? And also going back to what Carlos was saying earlier, the importance of indigenous knowledge and how this knowledge already exists and can help us so much. And there's so many benefits, as Mark was saying. And I personally see how some of the same people who have caused the climate crisis the most are also often putting a lot of money looking into other solutions that could work, but could also be we could also just invest in what already works and what we already know exists. And as you said, Mark, China is showing that political will, it is possible. And that's what we really need to push on. And as a campaigner of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, I cannot skip a call of the CCAG without mentioning that we need to get rid of the fossil fuels as well. And we've already seen so many scientists say, and this is one of the reasons why the whole net zero thing is taking so long also, because we haven't turned off the tap of the actual emissions, and it is possible to do this. But aside from the fossil fuel industry, I think, Carlos, earlier you already mentioned methane a little bit. Can you both tell us a little bit about what the role of methane reduction is and other fast-acting measures and how it plays in preventing dangerous feedback loops?
Let me start, and Mark will certainly do very well responding that. But of course, when we look at methane within 80 to 100 years is 28, 30 times more powerful than greenhouse to remove infrared radiation, greenhouse effect. However, the lifetime of methane in the atmosphere is much, much, much less, 9 to 12 years in the atmosphere. So it's going to be very important. And when we look at the sixth assessment report, said methane responds to second after CO2 in the warming. So it was essential to reduce. Well, one very important aspect is as soon as we get to zero fossil fuels, most of the methane comes from natural gas. 70% of natural gas is methane. So if we reduce fossil fuels, then, in exploring fossil fuels, there is leakage of natural gas, methane. And also the second component is these livestock, ruminants. They produce methane, and then they burp methane. So that's the second one. Also, in garbage, big mountains of garbage, they also produce that. The third one. So anyway, of course, getting to zero fossil fuels will reduce a lot of methane, and also when we move towards regenerative livestock, we also going to reduce a lot of methane. So those are important elements. And also, I know, for instance, in not far from where I live, in São Paulo city, there are two areas there with garbage, urban garbage, that they remove the methane, and that becomes biomethanol for generating electricity. So you can also do that. Anyway, I would say very important, because if we do that, and COP26, you recall, all countries said we have quickly, not only as scientists, but many countries that let's reduce methane, because it's so powerful as a greenhouse gas that it would really reduce the risks. But we are not so far reducing methane.
So for me, Mitzi, I completely agree with Carlos. It's about giving us some breathing space to shift away from fossil fuels. Okay, remember, 80% of all the energy generated in the world is now from fossil fuels. And people will say, hang on, all of this renewable energy, huge wind turbines going up everywhere, that's only eating up the increased demand per year, not the base load. So we need to buy some time to shift the rest of our energy system to renewable energy. And methane gives us that opportunity. And as Carlos said, there are three main places. One is fossil fuel production. Okay, now we can easily clean that up with proper regulations. And the key thing there is it's because the industry cannot be bothered to fix the leaks. It flares a lot of natural gas because it's waste and they don't want to collect it. And so therefore we could mandate that they have to produce fossil fuels in the safest and cleanest way possible. When it comes to waste, huge issues about waste around the world. You've seen the huge waste dumps that Western countries have created in developing countries because we just throw our waste at them, okay? So that produces huge toxins and huge pollution events, but also lots of methane. So we need to clean those up anyway for public health. And the last one is basically cows and other ruminants which produce methane. And I have to say, Carlos, unfortunately, it's from both ends. It's both burping and farting. And my daughters love that. But the key thing there is, if we as a global society move to a more plant-based diet, okay, which is healthier for us, it means we're going to live longer, our children are going to live longer, then we eat less meat, we need less livestock, and we need less deforestation to clear the land for the cattle to range on. So it's a win-win-win. And that's the key thing. All of these are so sensible that you would say, why aren't we doing it anyway? Forget about climate change. We should be doing it anyway. So that's it. But it's the lobbying power of the meat lobby, the fossil fuel lobby, and the countries that rely on those for a massive part of their income. And that's what we have to actually deal with and try to negotiate.
I have one last question to try to end this call on a positive note. You've both already said very effective and scalable actions, nature-based solutions, speeding up net zero targets, all the ways that we could reduce methane now, and in ways that would benefit all of us either way, right? Are there shifts already under the way? Let me say that again. Are there shifts already underway that give you confidence that we can still course correct? And if yes, what are they?
I'm going to kick off. So literally today, my team and I have published a paper that looks at the last 15 years of wind power in the United Kingdom. And by doing proper economic modeling, we have shown that it has saved £104 billion of taxpayers' money by having wind power instead of gas. And that is a huge sort of like finding, because what it says is, guys, they keep telling you it's too expensive to go net zero. It's too expensive for renewables. No, it saves you money. And again, forget about sort of like saving the planet. People always respond to, it's going to save you money. It's going to make you safer. It's going to make things cheaper. Therefore, you should do it anyway. And it helps the climate.
And I just want to add, absolutely agree with that. Renewable energy is better in all respects, including economically. For instance, in my country, solar and wind energy is 1/3, 1/4 of the cost, electricity, of the cost of natural gas-fired power plants. Also, many more jobs. Solar panels hire 4 times more people. So, but an additional tremendous benefit, the main source of air pollution, urban air pollution, is fossil fuels. Urban air pollution leads to 7 million deaths a year, 2 to 4 year reduction of life expectancy in all cities. So in addition to combating the climate emergency, we are going to improve the health of billions of people.
I mean, Carlos, just imagine we would have healthy children, we'll have green cities, we'll have lots of green jobs, we will have a nice stable climate. It's like, I never quite understand why people keep lobbying against this wonderful future that we know we can have.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you both so much for really reminding us that it is possible to have this future, and that the tipping points that we're seeing, they're not distant hypotheticals, they're imminent risks, but we can still change them. But they demand immediate and collective action, especially pressuring on that political will that both of you have really focused on in this conversation as well, and really having nature-based solutions, protecting the Amazon, cutting methane, and accelerating emissions reductions. And we have to do all of this, not just for the climate, but really at the end of the day for our lives, for our health. And I really love that framing. I really appreciate it, because I think it makes it feel closer to us that this is really just about the health of our loved ones and ourselves. So thank you both, Carlos and Mark, for sharing your insights, and to everyone for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye-bye.